18 to 24-year-olds make up almost 10% of the American population, but in the 2018 midterm elections, they made up only 6% of voters. Our generation wants progressive change, but only we can make it happen. We are the future. We are the next generation of voters. I'm Jack DePremio, and this is the Next Generation Politics Podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Next Generation Politics Podcast. Today, we are joined by former Undersecretary of the Army, Patrick Murphy. He was elected to the United States House of Representatives, representing Pennsylvania's 8th Congressional District from 2007 to 2011. Murphy was also the former anchor of Taking the Hill on MSNBC. He is currently a senior managing director at Ancora Consulting in Philadelphia. Thank you for coming on here today.
Jack, so thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So first off, I wanted to touch on COVID-19 for a minute. According to a recent report by the New York Times, about 1/3 of enlisted troops and armed servicemen have rejected the COVID vaccine. How can Secretary Austin encourage vaccinations to increase in the military? And has domestic politics surrounding the development of the vaccine affected this at all? Or is this something unique to servicemen?
I think that's a great question, Jack. I do think that actions speak louder than words. So the fact that the SecDef got the vaccine, showed it, and it was public is helpful, including his staff, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and others. So I think that's number one. It's great. And I think they are encouraging our troops and their family members to obviously get the vaccine. But there is no doubt that it has become political. And it's been a little bit political. And like American society, there are folks that don't trust the process, as we call it here in Philadelphia. They don't believe, that think it was rushed, that they're going to get hurt. I mean, and unfortunately, I'm a big proponent of it. I mean, I think we need herd immunity. We need folks to get it. I know I'm going to take it when I'm eligible. I haven't skipped in line. In fact, my 74-year-old parents are both getting it tomorrow. So I'm excited about that, but no, it's important. And it's important because we got to make sure we can reopen schools, that we get our economy back on the right track, and that we're healthy as a country.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. And people should totally get the vaccine as soon as possible. Some people believe that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is less effective, but it's correlated to 0% hospitalizations and deaths. So people should definitely get it. I want to shift to the Biden administration and the crisis of homelessness.
Can I just brag something really quick about Johnson & Johnson, Jack, because you brought it up?
Yes.
Johnson & Johnson, the CEO, lives in Bucks County. His name's Alex Skorsky. He's a West Point graduate, and he went to Wharton. He's an Army Ranger, but I'm a big proponent of veterans who serve their countries, whether it's 2 or 4 or 10 years, whatever, and then they get out and they do great things. And some of the most iconic global brands, Jack, were started by veterans coming back. So Alex Skorsky, Johnson & Johnson, Sam Walton started Walmart, Phil Knight started Nike. These are all Army officers.
Wow.
Fred Smith was a Marine, started FedEx, and the largest communications company in the world, Comcast, started by Ralph Roberts and Navy.
Wow.
So I'm sorry.
No, I like that trivia there. That's actually good. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, the problem is, and what I'm always trying to solve real quick, Jack, is that half the veterans came back from World War II. Half went to college under the GI Bill, so we democratized education in America, higher ed, but half went back and worked in a small business or started doing small business. And now my generation of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, it's less than 5% that start their own small business. So I'm all about veteran entrepreneurs, starting their own thing, driving innovation in our country, and creating the next global iconic brand.
Yeah, that's great.
I digress.
Does the Biden administration have like a special fund to help entrepreneurs for veterans?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that I'm partnering with the Student Veterans of America. So right now there's about 1.1 million students in American colleges and universities that are going to college on the post-NAV and GI Bill that I helped co-author. And so some are arguing, including the Student Veterans of America, and I agree with them, that if you earn that right to have the GI Bill, why not use it to start your own business and have that seed capital to create the next Walmart, FedEx, Comcast, Nike.
And I imagine that would have bipartisan support, I would hope, because Republicans always talk about how pro-business they are.
You would hope so, but access to capital, we need folks that from all walks of life. So, and that's why immigration policy is so important, because a lot of small businesses are started by immigrants. And so I'm a big proponent of immigration reform and entrepreneurship, and there's a lot of different policies that'll come forward so people can get after it and put this country back on the right track.
Thank you. Yes. And speaking of the Biden administration, obviously mental health challenges and PTSD are really high among veterans. I really don't know how the Trump administration handled this. I imagine they talked about it, but maybe they didn't act on it. Are you confident that Secretary McDonough in the Biden administration will propose new policies to fund mental health services and housing programs for veterans? Or is this something that Congress has to address?
Well, you know, it's interesting, Jack. I think it's a whole of nation approach, not even a whole of government approach. When we talk about the epidemic of veteran suicide and mental health across our country. So the military, let me just go a broader view, and I'm going to be very specific. So broader view, the military has been this agent of social change in American history. Right. The Army and Navy, Marine Corps started before the country was actually established in 1776. We started the military in 1775. But we democratized education after World War II. 16 million GIs came back. In the middle of the Korean War, we desegregated the military when half the country was still segregated. Positively, we were able to do that under President Truman, a good Democrat, via executive order. Then when I was in Congress, you know, authoring a bill that repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. The repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, after we kicked out 13,000 troops just because of who they loved, was wrong, cost the American taxpayer $1.2 billion. And when we passed that, it ushered in marriage equality. It made our country stronger and better and more equal, and the more living by the values of justice and fairness, that equal protection under our law and under that blueprint of our country, which is the U.S. Constitution. Now, fast forward, the next generation or the next movement, I do believe, is in mental health. And mental health, Jack, as you know, is just as important as physical health. So yes, in the military, we grade you how many push-ups, sit-ups in the 2-mile run you could do. We do obstacle courses, all this other stuff. We take you to rifle range, but we also have to make sure that we invest in mental resiliency.
Yes.
I will tell you, Jack, I lost 19 of my brothers in Baghdad, Iraq. You know, I was a professor at West Point teaching constitutional law. When 9/11 happened, our nation was attacked. Thousands of innocents were killed. I then deployed. My first deployment was to Bosnia, where our country was sent under President Clinton to stop the worst ethnic cleansing in Europe since World War II. And they were killing Muslims. And President Clinton said, not under my watch. And we sent tens of thousands of troops there. We didn't lose any of the combat because we used overwhelming force, and we stopped that worst ethnic cleansing. I mean, they were literally taking young Muslim boys as young as 15, loading them up in buses and executing them on the side of the road in towns like Srebrenica. But that next, you know, and then came back from that deployment and then was reassigned with the 82nd Airborne Division. And unfortunately, when I was in Baghdad, Iraq, as part of the invasion force, and I lost those 19 men. But of those 19 that were killed, the majority were from roadside bombs. But Jack, one was killed by himself. He took his own life. And every day there's about 20 veterans and active members of our military that take their own life. It is an epidemic. It is way higher than the civilian society. And it just breaks my heart. And we got to do more. And we got to use technology. We got to let people know we got to break the stigma. So, you know, when I helped run the Army under President Obama, you know, we did things like what's called embedded behavioral health teams, where social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists were actually in the company area where they're doing PT with troops. So if they want to grab them before or after, you know, formation, they can go and talk to a doctor. They didn't have to go to the hospital, which denotes, at least subconsciously, that you're sick. Right. You know, going to see a mental health professional is an act of strength. It's like going to a personal trainer. So, you know, we got to break that stigma. And I think the next frontier of that agent of social change, especially with our military and veteran community, is frankly doing it through mental health. So I am confident, and I'll finish to answering your question, in Secretary Dennis McDonough. Why? Because President Joe Biden and Jill Biden are passionate about this. There's some, Bill, when I served in the Army together. Bill, as you know, is no longer with us, but they're passionate to make sure that we get after it, that we don't have that epidemic going on, the homelessness that's going on. We have a housing first policy, and we got to make sure when we have about 250,000 veterans who transition, that active troops become veterans every year, that they have a job, that they have resources, that they have a point in contact when they go back home to places like Philadelphia or Bucks County, where I'm located.
Yeah, no, thank you for your service, and also for your service in Congress. Advocating to end Don't Ask, Don't Tell as a gay man. That's really important to me. In case I ever wanted to serve, I could serve openly. And part of the mental health challenge in our country is admitting that we need help. So breaking the stigma, talking about it more, I think should be at the center of the Biden administration. And also, this is really interesting. Do you think that the VFW healthcare system could take on potentially like new mental health care, or should we how can we address that in the VFW health system?
Well, I do think that it is a whole nation approach. So it's not just like,
Right.
hey, Joe Biden says, hey, VA, go fix this, right? Because yes, there's just under 20 million American veterans. There's only about 9 million that are enrolled in the VA. And of those 20 that take their own life every day, the majority of them are not in the system. So they're not in the VA system to register for healthcare. Like I don't get healthcare from the VA. Like I have Blue Cross Blue Shield. But I would say to you, and to others, the VA has to play a stronger role. The private sector has to step up as well, nonprofit community. There is a sea of goodwill out there, Jack, but we need to do better. And I will tell you, I appreciate you saying that about the repeal of the Nice Hotel. If you don't mind, if I could just, it really was crystal clear to me, because people said, well, Patrick, you're a straight combat veteran, a devout Catholic. Why would you be so passionate about leading the fight to repeal it? I was like, because when you see it wrong, it's our duty to stand up and make this a better country. The whole preamble of our Constitution is in order to make a more perfect union. But Jack, I saw great Americans get thrown out just because of who they loved. And when it was so crystal clear to me was when I got an email from a captain in Kabul, Afghanistan. And he wrote me a note and he goes, Congressman Murphy, sir, I got an email from someone who knows you, that served with you. And I'll tell you, he goes, the worst thing in the world when you're deployed is to get a Dear John and Dear Jane letter in the mail. The person that you love the most is going to be there when you come home. And he goes, Congressman, I'm on my 4th deployment. I'm a company commander. I'm a captain in the United States Army. That means, as you know, I lead 200 men and women.
Right.
And when one of them get a Dear John or a Dear Jane letter in the mail, because it could be so traumatic, we make sure that they're battle buddies with them. Then we walk them in to see the chaplain. And then we go talk to the commander. Maybe we can send them home, maybe we can't, but we at least see what we could do. But Patrick, never in a million years did I think I get one of these letters. And the person that I love the most, just let me know they're not going to be there when I come home.
Right.
And he goes, I'm sitting here and it's 3 o'clock in the morning in Kabul, Afghanistan. And he goes, I'm holding my 9mm weapon and I'm thinking about blowing my brains out. But the only thing that's giving me hope is this Pennsylvania Congressman, Patrick Murphy's an Iraq vet like me. That is funny for me. And he goes, because Patrick, I can't go to a chaplain. I sure as heck can't go to a commander. And I can't even tell a battle buddy because I happen to be gay.
Right. That's
And
tragic.
in my time most of need, the Army and the country I love the most is turns back on me. But thank you for fighting to make it better. And Jack, that's what politics should be about making a positive difference in this world and a better country. And we're not perfect, but there's a lot more we could be doing to make this a more perfect union.
Definitely. Thank you so much. That's actually really inspiring. Thank you. And speaking of representation and diversity in the military, obviously, the leadership in the military is very white. Recent reports have analyzed the lack of representation of minorities and people of color within the military. How can the Defense Department act on the promotion of diversity within military leadership? But this also goes to another question of economic inequality within the ranks of military service. The military often recruits from poor neighborhoods, and a lot of people that serve and end up dying are poor Americans. So how do we handle both diversity in the military while also addressing economic inequality?
Well, Jack, you heard me earlier, it's about leadership, and leadership is actions, not just words. And I think President Biden, as the new commander in chief, spoke volumes when we have the first Black Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, a great American, a patriot, a CENTCOM commander, West Point graduate. There's no one better. The Deputy Secretary of Defense is Kathy Hicks, a woman, again, so first time in history that have that power, that leadership. And then, they're now filling out the ranks of undersecretaries and service secretaries, in the future. And I do think President Biden wants, and the military needs to look like the face of America.
Right.
And it isn't diverse. I will say the military is actually more diverse as a whole than American society. About 31% of folks are people of color. And again, and they come from all walks of life. I will tell you that there are some folks, and socioeconomically, there are some folks from lower income that do join our military, and we do recruit all over the country. We're in Ivy League schools, we're community colleges, we're in high schools. It is what it is. I will tell you that I do think it's a problem, though, that it's less than 1% of America, Jack, that has served in the longest wars in American history. And these warriors have deployed time and time again. I've done 2 deployments. My brother's done 2 deployments. There are folks in this warrior class that have deployed dozens of times. And so when you have most of America that don't want to serve, that don't have what's called the propensity to serve, or the ability, because the obesity epidemic and other things, because you don't have to be in perfect shape, you have to be in relative shape that we can get you in better shape that, do the obstacle courses and run 2 miles.
You have to get in shape.
Right. But, it does, and by the way, when you leave the military, you're more likely to be employed, you're more likely to be a CEO in a Fortune 500 company and all these great things. But, a lot of folks in society look down at the military. Let's face it. I mean, they have a healthy respect and thank you for your service. But, when you say, well, what about your son and daughter? Well, no, it's not for my son, not for my daughter, and I know when I served, at 19, I was dating a girl from Bucks County and I was home on Christmas break, and her dad said to me, Patrick, like, is it true you joined Army ROTC? And I'm like, yes, sir. Like, he goes, and I'm like, yeah, I want to be a lieutenant in 2 years, 2.5 years. I'm hoping to be an Army officer and be a leader of men, be a leader of character, men and women, sorry. And he goes, but Patrick, he goes, why? Like, you're in a dean's list in college. Like, you're the captain of the hockey team as a sophomore. Like, why would you do that? And I said, and it was like I was an alien. I'm like, well, sir, like, I want to serve. Like, I'm going to be a lieutenant. Like, I'm going to be an Army officer. Like, now, did I think 10 years later I was going to be in the middle of Baghdad, Iraq, in 130-degree heat, and leading men and women with the 82nd Airborne Division? No, but I also didn't think I was going to teach constitutional law at West Point. I didn't think I was going to be a U.S. Congressman at that time. The Army and the military has opened up a lot of doors for me. But when you look at, I think there's 4,000 American college and universities. Of those, I teach at West Point right now, and I've taught there before, and it's a phenomenal institution. Of all the colleges, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, MIT, West Point came in 3rd. Last year, we usually come top 5, top 10. How many Rhodes and Oxford scholars that we have, because that's the Athens and Sparta of America. Yes, all 4,000 cadets have to run 2 miles, have to be athletes, but we mandate the academics is just as important. And it's probably, and frankly, the best public college in America.
I agree. Yes, West. I have a lot of respect for West Point. Actually, my mom's boss, the president of Williamson College, who you might know, President Rounds, is a great example of leadership from West Point. And you're right. There's definitely a stigma, especially in my generation, of kids that join the military. They're often framed as desperate, as naive, and stupidly and blindly serving a country for oil, or this false notion of like American exceptionalism abroad. And I wanted to ask you, how can we talk about foreign intervention and mistakes, and honestly, I think that war crimes that George Bush committed with the Iraq War, how can we frame criticism of the military and interventionism while also honoring veterans? Because there's a slippery slope. there's a slippery slope between criticizing the military and criticizing service people. And that needs to be addressed, I think.
Yeah, Jack, that's a great question. I'd say one thing. We have to separate the war from the warrior.
Right.
Because it's not the warrior that chooses what battles we and what fights we get into. It's actually the political leadership of our country. It's the president of the United States, and he can't act or she can't act unless it's the Congress, because only Congress, Article 1 of our Constitution says only Congress, it's enumerated that they have the power to get us into war. The president executes on that. Now, Congress punts a lot of times their responsibility to the president. I think we should have a new AUMF, authorization for use for military force. We can get into that debate right now, but Congress wants to punt their responsibility when it is the political leadership. But I will tell you, separating the war from the warrior, I think it's a lesson learned historically from the Vietnam War, Jack. I will tell you, our country did not treat our Vietnam veterans the right way.
No.
When they came home, many were spat at. They called them baby killers. They said this and that. And again, there were some bad apples in our military, and there's some bad apples in our society, and we make no excuses. But that's why we have the UCMJ, and we hold them accountable.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, they're just executing and fighting against the Viet Cong and others because that's what they were asked to do for our nation, to stop the spread of communism at that time. But for the great majority of American history, our military and our country, we have been the reluctant warrior. So if you look at the symbol of America, it's an American, or look at the symbol behind me, it's that American eagle. And one talon holds 13 arrows, signifying our military might, and the 13 original colonies. The other talon, though, holds the olive branch to show our economic and our diplomatic leadership throughout the world. And it's that counterbalance, it's that reluctant warrior. And so that's why, our military should be very specific and used as a last resort to be that reluctant warrior. But when push does come to shove, there are folks out there that want to do us harm. Just yesterday, we had 10 people that were killed in an Aurora. Last week, we had 8 people that were killed in Atlanta, Georgia. That's just in our own country. There's people out there that are, killing Muslims, frankly, genocide in China going on right now. You heard me talk about Bosnia.
Bosnia, that was a case where I really believed that Bill Clinton had a moral duty to intervene. He should have done it in Rwanda too. Why is it that a white European country is granted U.S. protection, but not Rwanda? But that's another.
Yeah, but Jack, part of even those things, we have to learn our lessons of history, otherwise we'll repeat them. So the lesson learned in Vietnam was what we call the POW doctrine under Colin Powell. It was have a clear mission, use overwhelming force to accomplish that mission, and have a clear exit strategy. We did it in Bosnia and Kosovo. We used overwhelming force to stop the worst ethnic cleansing in Europe when they were killing Muslims, and we stopped it. And we didn't have enough troops when we went to Iraq. We shouldn't have been in Iraq in the first place. But even in Afghanistan, we tried to do it on the cheap. It took us so long to get bin Laden. Finally, President Barack Obama brought him to justice because he basically doubled the size of troops over there to snuff him out and bring that murderer who killed thousands of innocent Americans on 9/11 to justice. And now we have to have an extra strategy, coming home. It has to be a political solution. But it's not the military, that gets us into these fights. And that's why we have to learn from history and continue to separate the war from the warrior, but also hold those political leaders accountable and not just use our military willy-nilly, and have that military and have our country as that reluctant warrior.
And thank you. And my friends on the left, remember this. Separate the war from the warrior. We should not be trashing servicemen. Trash George Bush, trash Richard Nixon. Do not spit on patriotic Americans. I know this wasn't one of the questions that I prepared, but since we did touch on the Middle East for a minute, do you think that Joe Biden should hold the May 4th deadline on troop withdrawal in Afghanistan? Or is the Taliban going to pull the wool over our eyes and really just continue attacking civilians and the Afghani government? Should Joe Biden extend the deadline?
Well, I think Secretary of State Tony Blinken had a great and forceful and much needed directive to the Taliban and the Afghan leaders, saying, This is not, if you ever saw the cartoon Peanuts, Lucy and the football with Charlie Brown. You know, we want to have an exit strategy. We want to bring the troops home, but we're not going to allow genocide and women to be slaughtered just because they're going to school again in Afghanistan, which the Taliban is against. But they're now going to school, and that's a positive thing. So, but you know, we need to make sure that's not the endless wars that, frankly, a lot of folks do want support, frankly, because it's not their sons and daughters that are serving. And then they are outsourcing it to the warrior class of America, that less than 1% that's serving. So I do think that we should hold them accountable. We should have, you know, timelines to bring our troops home and get after it. But it has to be acknowledged by the Afghan government and also the Taliban, so the shenanigans don't continue to happen, you know, once we leave.
Yes, and I agree. And also, Iran is posing a huge challenge to the Biden administration. Should we? I know Obama was criticized a lot with the way he handled Israel. A lot of people said that he ignored Bibi Netanyahu. Should we start out diplomatically with Iran? And what do you want to see from the State Department? Should we immediately start talking about the nuclear deal?
Yeah, first off, there's no weakness in talking to folks, even if you disagree with them, because we want to make sure that we're at least talking and use the military as a last resort. So there's no doubt. There's news reports this week that Iranians were planning to take out the 4-star general, the vice chief of staff of our army at Fort McNair. These are not classified, so I'm not telling you anything that's classified right now because it's been in the paper. But I will tell you that that threat is taken very seriously. But you know, when you look at the leadership under the Biden administration, to make sure that, you know, we go back to the American eagle, and as I told you, is that symbol of America as that reluctant warrior. That, you know, we have a strong military, not actually to go fight wars. Those who wear the cloth of our country, that serve in the military, we don't want a war. Those of us who saw war, we don't want it for our sons and daughters. We want it to have as a deterrent so others don't harm others, so they don't hurt and they don't kill Muslims on the side of the road, that they don't kill people for oil or land or because they can, because they're more powerful. They're thugs in this world, and we're not the policemen of the world, but we also, you know, we've been given so many graces in our country. We have the #1 military in the world and #1 economy in the world. We shouldn't abuse either of them, though, and we should use it as a force for good, and let people know our strength and use it sparingly.
Thank you. And I think that's a good note to end on. And yeah, we'll see how this all plays out. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, Jack, hey, you can follow me on social media. I'm at Patrick Murphy PA. That's at Patrick Murphy PA on Insta. And
I love
Twitter,
your post. I like your authentic account. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about Philly sports a lot, and you know, I just did that movie with Tom Holland, consulted, called Cherry on Apple Films, and then we're doing a CBS show in a little bit on come April 1st, World According to Al, about an Iraq interpreter coming back home here. But listen, I appreciate it. I will send you the Army ROTC packet for American University. They have ROTC, but I know you're going to American University next year, Jack. By the way, one of the great up and coming companies in our region is called Power Home and Remodeling. They're in Chester.
Right. Yes, Power.
The CEO, the co-CEO is Asher Raphael. Asher is an American University graduate, and his co-CEO is also, they both played soccer at American. So
yeah, that's awesome.
You should be very proud.
Yeah, Power did the signing for my family. So
there you go.
All right. Well, thank you.
We'll give them a shout out on when you put this out on social media, and we'll see the responses. We gave their two CEOs, they have co-CEOs, Corey and Asher, a shout out.
Yes. Thank you so much.
All right, Jack. Have a great day, buddy.
Bye.